Well, hello, Dr. Kakkis, Emil. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's especially great that you could be with us during this time, especially this past year, that we've put an emphasis on helping young researchers, early career researchers, become acquainted with people with incredible success and a record of accomplishment under their belt. And that certainly means you, a leader, a scientist, a physician, an entrepreneur, and a person who many young researchers aspire to be just like. So it is really a wonderful opportunity, and hundreds of young career researchers are able to join us through this virtual format. So thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, we're so glad. So I'll say just a couple of things that I know about you, and then I want to ask some questions and we can just chat. So I know that you're a medical geneticist. I know you're a physician scientist, and that is, many people say, that is becoming a vanishing breed and not a good thing. That we, just at the moment we need you the most, arguably, it's harder and harder for young aspiring physicians and researchers to have that dual path. So I hope you'll reflect on that at some point. We also know you're a pioneer in enzyme replacement therapy and other research breakthroughs that have advanced desperately needed treatments for rare and ultra rare diseases. And it's so special that you founded Every Life, the foundation that has created a place for community of disparate people who have not maybe other things in common, but they do have this one huge challenge, whether it's themselves, their cousin, nephew, child, someone in their lives who is struggling with a rare disease. Now that label too often has meant hopeless, but you have helped change that in significant ways. But there's more to do. We know that rare diseases, according to what I've learned, impact 1 of 10 Americans, and of course, many more people nationwide and worldwide, and that over 90% of known rare diseases have no current therapeutic or other way of helping people who are often struggling in emotional ways as well as physical. And the horrible toll of the death rate, even, especially on young people, on children, is appalling. And if there was ever a call to action, statistics like that, heartbreaking stories that we all know, this is it. And you've met that challenge. So the question is, how do we escalate things now? And so first question to start out with is, what would you say are the key levers for change and innovation right now in drug development and in the regulatory process that would support accelerated timelines for rare disorders and diseases?
Well, thanks, Mary. I think first I would say there's been a tremendous increase in the number of technologies available that have worked in humans, and that opens up the window for a period of what I call the golden age for rare disease treatments. But to get those treatments actually to patients successfully is a challenge still, and particularly for the ultra rare. And so there are a number of things that I think could be enhanced or improved that would help us get those therapies from concept to actual patients. One of the first things is understanding that a lot of these diseases are heterogeneous and complex, and that traditional clinical endpoint studies are very difficult to construct and run because of irreversible disease or variations between patients. Abilities to use biomarker endpoints that are disease activity measures would allow us to more effectively treat those patients, discover what works, and optimize that treatment. That's one of the key things that just hasn't happened. It worked great in oncology. It's worked well in viral treatment, but it hasn't been applied to the rare disease nearly enough. The second thing is that the FDA itself has a challenge in recruiting, retaining the best people. And Janet Woodcock has done an excellent job in reorganizing the review divisions of FDA, which I think greatly improves the possibility of having specialized reviewers, but we need to improve the ability of the FDA to recruit, promptly hire, and build out a team of physician scientists who are on the review side, because review is just as difficult as the development side. And there's just not enough talent there, and they need to do more. And I think the reorganization is great. We need to get the people. I think the final thing is we need to understand how all this comes together in development, and that we need to realize that while NIH is critical at coming up with ideas, that the biotech industry is the one that has to finish it and turn it into a drug. The more burden we create on that, the more cost that occurs, the more delay, and the more trouble. And what ends up happening is companies start focusing on larger rare diseases and not the 85% of them that are the ultra rare, because they can't make it work. So we need to figure out how to make the development process cost efficient so that we can get more done with a certain amount of investment. And if you had better biomarkers, better review, and other aspects of development, I think we could get more products through with a certain amount of investment and take all that science technology we've created and really apply it successfully to patients with rare diseases.
So let's dive in on some of those things, because they sound like, while promising, also pretty significant barriers, right? So are these problems that money can solve, that more resources, like if the FDA had more resources, are there the people out there, the physician scientists available to hire to do the regulatory review? I mean, that's just one example. And biomarkers, what's the problem there? Is this a resource problem, or is it a technological problem that we need Operation Warp Speed for rare diseases, or what?
Well, those two problems are distinctive, but they actually interact. So the challenge with FDA is, from what I understand, is when they identify someone they want to hire, it takes 8 months before they actually get them hired because of the process involved.
Yeah.
Second thing is the jobs, when they were at CBER in the early days, they had jobs that involved having some academic activity as well as review, which made the jobs more interesting and allowed them to get higher caliber physician scientific talent who didn't want to become just a government worker yet. There are ways, and this is how the ODAC division or oncology division operates. They have highly trained oncologists who also have, many of them, 50% of them have joint appointments and research activities. That's the model they need to work on in time recruiting, creating these joint appointment models to recruit the type of talent that know the science. When you have more people that know the science deeply, it's easier to look at biomarkers and understand them. And the thing about biomarkers, Mary, that's people don't really understand, they look at biomarkers as a compromise. And what I'm saying to you, biomarkers are not a compromise. They're actually a smarter way to do development. They are a more accurate way to do development. And when you have heterogeneous, complex diseases, as many of the rare diseases that are not treated today are, and especially when some of that disease, clinical disease, is irreversible or variably irreversible, it is very hard to, and there are small populations, it's very hard to run randomized studies with clinical endpoints that actually succeed. Right. But the biomarkers will tell you what's going on.
Right.
And they'll tell you what's going on, even if the disease is irreversible in some patients. But by getting a product approved on a biomarker, we can then derive for newborn screening and diagnose that patient earlier in their course so that you can treat them and have that long-term impact. But if you end up diagnosing and treating patients in trials that are already way down the progress of the course of the disease, then you can never get to the end. So I would look at biomarkers not as a compromise. For many diseases, they will be more efficient, more accurate, and they will allow not only the first drug, they allow for improvements to occur. And if you look at the HIV story, right, our first few approvals led to combination drugs.
Right.
And, in the first 16 years, 29 drugs, 4 combinations. The whole transformation of HIV occurred when it was something that everyone thought they were all going to die from AIDS at one point in time, if you remember those days.
I remember those days very well from running a research institute in San Francisco.
So, it would not have been possible with clinical endpoints. Right. The biomarkers allows this to happen. Right. We need to get our heads away from the field function of survive as the only way, as the best way, and start understanding how to measure disease scientifically, accurately, And then I think we can really open the door to moving forward. And it doesn't have to be perfect, Mary. The first endpoint doesn't have to be perfect. It needs to be good.
Yes.
And with
yes.
time, we'll figure out better. Just like happened in HIV. The first biomarker wasn't the best, and then it got better.
Yeah.
So I think we just need to get smarter about understanding how to use disease activity biomarkers as a way to drive smarter, faster development, especially for complex rare diseases.
Right. So the points you're making here, and I'm not going to regurgitate all of them, repeat them back to you, but I think it is the clear out, it's an outline for advocacy. You know, you're talking about reframing conversations, stop thinking about biomarkers as a compromise. That's a big thought. We're still, even those of us who've kind of made that change of direction, it's still lingering out there, I know. So I regard that as really pretty big. And then the fact that there are models from oncology, you know, that are tried and true is another, just seems like such an easy step. So why, where do you see things in terms of an advocacy agenda? What can happen now? What's next? What would you advise?
Well, I think one of the first steps is, in fact, of defining an FDA commissioner who is pro-innovation, who is not stuck in what was, but what should be, and willing to do that. And we've had some great ones in recent times. And I think it's a really important part, because I think the agency right now, it doesn't operate well in taking risk or moving forward when there's that uncertainty. So getting an FDA commissioner who can be pro-innovation, whose job is not just to obstruct companies, but to actually ensure that patients get treated, right? That their job is to serve the patients of this country, and to take the science and make sure it's getting applied correctly. And that is what we need in the FDA commissioner's office. I was hoping Janet Woodcock would be the person. I'm hoping that still happens, but I realize that the process is still ongoing. But I do think that's the first step. The second step we've already taken, Mary. We actually already have a bill passed called Ultra within a prior PDUFA agreement, which defined that the FDA should create a guidance on how to qualify a biomarker for accelerated approval in these rare, ultra rare situations where there's limited data. And the law says that the guidance should describe how to use pharmacologic and pathophysiologic criteria to qualify a biomarker when other types of data are impossible or impractical to collect. That law needs to get implemented. It defines what should be required to qualify a biomarker. And if we can get there, we will start opening the door to actually moving forward. And while people have complained about the Duchenne approval and the recent Alzheimer's approval, the truth is both those approvals open the door to more investment and more solutions. And right now, those diseases are getting the kind of attention they deserve as horrible diseases that need to get treated. And that is how FDA can change the dynamic of taking the science we've created and really applying it.
Well, we're all in agreement that we need a permanent FDA commissioner. Acting people just can't have the same impact. It's a fact. Are you in the running? You don't have to answer that. You don't have to answer that. Okay. Our time is going rapidly. And I do want to offer you the opportunity to reflect on, and you brought it up, I brought it up earlier, about the importance of the physician researcher, let's call it, say. We need those people. You pointed out there need to be more of them at the FDA. Would you have any advice for young career researchers about pursuing that very difficult road, or otherwise? Anything else you want to say about that?
Well, it is very difficult. And I'll tell you, Mary, what the biggest problem is for the MD, PhD graduate like myself. Trying to start out and run your lab as an assistant professor is incredibly hard, because it's so difficult to get R01s. And the R01s may be relatively small and short term, setting you on a treadmill. In my first 5 years in academia, we're running around on a treadmill trying to write grants and getting rejections. And despite the success we were having during treatment. So you imagine we're having trouble getting RR1s, but yet we're ready to treat a disease for the first time, Mary. So
Right.
I can't imagine if you're doing something new, completely new, that's not succeeding, how hard it is to get grants. So I do think it's very hard for people to get traction in their careers. I think our universities need to do a better job for protecting and creating an environment for those young researchers to get traction in their academic careers. Now, I left academia into biotech, and what I would say to people, if people said, "Oh, you're going to the dark side, and therefore now you're going to be financially motivated at all times," that's just not true. And I set a standard for myself that I was always going to do the right thing wherever I was. But what I do have are tools, Mary. I have financial tools.
Yes.
And starting Ultragenyx a few years ago, we've now raised $2 billion over our life of the company, 11 years. And we now have 1,000 employees. And I'm working on 20 diseases, Mary, at the same time with that team.
It's astonishing. We're going to have to cut it short. I'm sorry, wrap up. But what you have accomplished is a role model for others, and shining star out there. We applaud you. Thank you. You are an inspiration, and you've given us all some marching orders, I'd say, about things that need to happen and how to do that. So my thanks to you, and continued success. Keep leading.
Thanks so much, Mary. Thanks for having me.
You bet.